My sister literally called me fat and told me I wasn't welcome at her wedding. Can you believe that? Stick with me while I share my story, and if it touches you, don't forget to support our channel by hitting that subscribe button, dropping a like, and sharing it with the people you care about. I'm Lena Harper, and my sister Tess and I used to be really close. But over the years, she became competitive and cruel, especially about my appearance. When she announced her wedding, I was excited at first, but that excitement died the moment she insulted me in front of our family. She said I'd ruin her photos and refused to let me come. I felt humiliated and heartbroken. For weeks, I stayed quiet, crying and thinking about all the ways Tess had always put me down. Slowly, my sadness turned into determination. I discovered that Tess's fiancé, Marcus, had some risky financial issues she didn't know about. That's when I realized I could turn the tables without being mean, just smart. I started quietly gathering information, consulting a lawyer, and making a plan. On her wedding day, I showed up as a surprise, not as a guest, but in a way that allowed me to protect Tess from making a huge mistake. I revealed Marcus's financial troubles to her privately, showing I had saved the day. Tess was shocked and couldn't deny my intelligence. I didn't embarrass her in front of everyone, but I felt proud. For the first time, Tess realized she had underestimated me. I left the wedding with my dignity intact, finally feeling strong and respected. Have you ever been betrayed by someone you loved? Sometimes, staying calm and clever is the best revenge. I grew up with Tess in a small town where everyone knew each other. As kids, we shared secrets, played in the yard, and promised we'd always be close. But as we got older, I noticed she liked to compete with me in every little thing. Whether it was grades, clothes, or attention from family, Tess always had to be better. At first, I didn't mind, thinking it was just sisterly rivalry, but over time it started to sting. By the time I turned 28, I had just lost my job at a marketing firm. I felt uncertain about my future and struggled to feel confident about myself. I spent weeks trying to rebuild my life, sending out resumes, going to interviews, and wondering if I would ever feel proud again. I was already feeling fragile when Tess called to tell me her big news: she was engaged and planning a huge wedding. Instead of feeling happy for her, a knot formed in my stomach. I knew Tess would make everything about herself, and I worried that I wouldn't measure up. Memories of her subtle jabs and comparisons came rushing back, how she always hinted I wasn't pretty enough, smart enough, or successful enough. Suddenly, my own struggles seemed louder, more painful, and I realized this wedding would be another stage for her to shine while I felt invisible. Even though we shared so many childhood memories, I began to understand that our bond wasn't as simple as it once was. Tessa's constant need to outshine me made it impossible to ignore the tension growing between us. I knew that her wedding would test our relationship in ways I wasn't ready for, and deep down, I felt this was the moment I had to decide how to handle her cruelty. The night Tess dropped the bomb was supposed to be a normal family dinner. Everyone was gathered around the table, sharing laughs and stories, when she suddenly turned her attention to me. Without warning, she made a cutting comment about my appearance, comparing me to someone rounder than usual and smirking like it was a joke. I froze, unable to believe she would say something so cruel in front of everyone. The room went quiet, and all eyes shifted to me. My cheeks burned, a mix of shame and disbelief washing over me. I tried to brush it off, but Tess wasn't finished. Leaning back in her chair with that confident smirk, she announced, "I don't want you at my wedding. You'll ruin my photos." Every word hit me like a punch, echoing through my chest. I couldn't move. My heart raced, my stomach churned, and for the first time in years, I felt utterly powerless. Family members exchanged awkward glances, unsure if they should speak up, but no one did. Tess had made her point, and the humiliation settled in like a heavy weight. Anger bubbled inside me, but it was mixed with hurt so deep it made me feel hollow. I wanted to cry, to scream, to run away, but I stayed seated, holding it in. Every memory of her subtle jabs over the years came rushing back, making this moment even sharper. I realized that this wasn't just about a wedding, it was about her proving that she could make me feel small whenever she wanted. By the end of the night, I felt broken, humiliated, and enraged all at once. But beneath all that, a spark of determination began to grow. I couldn't let this go unanswered, and I knew I had to find a way to regain control. After that dinner, I retreated from everyone. For weeks, I stayed in my small apartment, barely answering calls or texts. Nights were the hardest. I'd sit by the window, staring at the empty streets, letting the tears flow freely. I kept asking myself why someone who was supposed to love me could treat me so harshly. Was family loyalty even worth it if it left me feeling worthless? As the days passed, my mind replayed countless moments with Tess. I remembered how she would subtly undermine my achievements, take credit for things I worked hard on, or make offhand remarks about my choices. Little by little, each memory stacked on top of the last, building a mix of sorrow and frustration that I couldn't ignore. At first, the sadness felt paralyzing. I questioned my worth, my appearance, and even my place in my own family. But slowly, amidst the ache, a different feeling began to emerge. I realized that I didn't have to stay stuck in this cycle of humiliation. The pain Tess caused me could either break me or fuel me. I started thinking about ways to take back control, to assert my worth without stooping to cruelty. I wanted to show her, and maybe even myself, that I could rise above her insults and regain my dignity. For the first time in weeks, I felt a flicker of strength. My heartbreak began shifting into determination, and I understood that I wouldn't let someone else define how I felt about myself. By the end of those lonely weeks, I was no longer just hurting. I was planning, quietly and carefully, how I could reclaim my confidence and self-respect. Tess had lit a fire in me, and I was ready to channel it into something powerful. One afternoon, while sorting through old family documents for unrelated reasons, I stumbled upon some papers that didn't seem right. They were financial statements connected to Marcus, Tessa's fiancé. At first, I thought I was mistaken, but as I read further, I realized he had been hiding loans and investments that were extremely risky. If Tess didn't know, she could lose a huge amount of money after the wedding. The discovery made my heart race. I felt a mix of concern and opportunity. Suddenly, I wasn't just the sister who had been insulted, I could become the one who had the knowledge to protect her, or at least to turn this situation in my favor. I didn't want revenge that hurt anyone physically or publicly, but I knew I could act cleverly. I spent days quietly piecing everything together. I created notes, compared statements, and made sure I understood the full scope of the risk. Each revelation made me more certain that Marcus was not as trustworthy as Tess believed. The more I learned, the more I realized that I could regain some control over a situation that had made me feel powerless for so long. It felt like a chess game. I had been a pawn in Tess's world, pushed around and belittled, but now I had a move she couldn't see coming. I didn't rush, I stayed patient, knowing that timing would be everything. I had to act in a way that showed intelligence, restraint, and precision. For the first time since the wedding insult, I felt a sense of empowerment. I knew I could turn this secret into leverage, not to humiliate Tess, but to prove that I was far stronger and smarter than anyone had given me credit for. I moved carefully after that discovery. I didn't confront anyone or reveal what I knew. Instead, I started keeping detailed records. Every questionable expense, every misplaced signature, every careless decision connected to Tess's shared finances went into a private folder. I treated it seriously, like evidence that might matter one day. Silence became my shield. I reached out to a family lawyer I trusted, someone who had known us since childhood. I framed my questions cautiously, asking in general terms about financial responsibility and legal exposure after marriage. Later, I met with a financial consultant under the pretense of learning to manage my own future better. From both conversations, I gained clarity. What Tess was stepping into could damage her stability for years. Each meeting strengthened my resolve. I wasn't gathering this information to hurt her publicly or to embarrass her the way she embarrassed me. I wanted something deeper. I wanted her to finally understand that I wasn't weak, careless, or insignificant. I wanted her to see that intelligence doesn't always announce itself loudly. Sometimes it waits. I planned quietly, mapping out how and when to act. Timing mattered. tone mattered. If I did this right, she wouldn't be able to dismiss me or twist the story. She would have to listen. More importantly, she would have to acknowledge my worth. This wasn't about anger anymore. It was about balance. For too long, I had been treated as someone beneath her. Now I held knowledge that could change her future. The idea of surprising her, not with cruelty, but with undeniable competence, gave me a sense of calm I hadn't felt in months. I didn't need applause or forgiveness. I needed recognition. And I was determined to earn it on my own terms, using patience, preparation, and a clear mind. I decided to take action that would give me an advantage without raising suspicion. I purchased a small property near the location where Tessa's wedding was planned. At first, it seemed like a coincidence, just a personal investment, but it also created an opportunity. By being nearby, I could position myself as someone helpful in ways she wouldn't anticipate. While managing this, I quietly reached out to friends, distant relatives, and people we both knew, collecting their thoughts about me and my character. I didn't make it obvious, I asked for casual advice or opinions, but I carefully preserved every compliment, every acknowledgement of my reliability and intelligence. These small endorsements could later support my credibility if I needed to step in or be noticed. I watched from a distance as Tess finalized her wedding plans, completely unaware of what I was doing. She continued making decisions as though everything was under control, while I quietly arranged things behind the scenes. Every action I took was measured, intended to create a subtle but undeniable presence. I wanted her to see me not as the sister she could dismiss, but as someone resourceful and capable. By being prepared, I could intervene if necessary and demonstrate competence that couldn't be ignored. Every detail mattered, the timing of meetings, the people I involved, and the impression I left without being intrusive. It was a careful game, a way to position myself so that when the moment came, Tess would be forced to recognize my value. By the time her wedding approached, I had transformed from the overlooked sibling into someone indispensable, though she had no idea. I felt a quiet thrill knowing that my careful planning would soon make all the difference. I spent hours preparing myself mentally. Every morning, I stood in front of the mirror, practicing calm expressions and steady breathing. I repeated silently that I wasn't defined by anyone else's cruelty, and that Tessa's insults didn't diminish my worth. This daily ritual gave me a sense of control I hadn't felt in months. I imagined the moment when everything I had planned would come together. I pictured Tess realizing that I had anticipated problems she hadn't even noticed, and that my actions had quietly saved the day. The thought of her surprise sent a rush through me, part thrill, part nervous tension. I focused on my posture, tone, and demeanor. Confidence wasn't about being loud, it was about carrying myself in a way that demanded respect without a single word of confrontation. I envisioned standing in a room full of people, calm and collected, while she tried to process what had happened. Even though excitement surged through me, a small part of me stayed anxious. I knew timing mattered, and any misstep could spoil everything I had worked for. But the anxiety sharpened my attention, keeping me alert to every detail and nuance. The mix of feelings was strange, pride, anticipation, and a quiet hunger for justice all blended together. I reminded myself that revenge didn't have to be bitter or loud, it could be subtle, classy, and undeniable. By the end of these sessions, I felt ready. I wasn't just preparing for a confrontation, I was preparing to reclaim respect and demonstrate my intelligence in a way Tess couldn't ignore. Every moment of practice made me stronger, more composed, and more determined to see my plan through perfectly. The day of the wedding finally came. Tess was radiant, completely convinced that everything was under control, while I arrived quietly, blending in as someone the staff assumed was part of the event planning team. No one suspected that I wasn't supposed to be there, and that gave me a quiet satisfaction. As I moved through the venue, I noticed the way Tess carried herself, confident, almost smug, believing every detail was perfect. Marcus hovered nearby, proud but oblivious to the problems that could unravel their celebration at any moment. Their focus on appearances made my information even more powerful. They had no idea how close they were to disaster. I kept my composure, walking with a calm, purposeful air. I interacted politely with staff, giving instructions when necessary, but my mind stayed sharp, noting every detail of the ceremony and every small misstep that could become critical later. Being present without being recognized allowed me to observe everything without confrontation. I could see the way family members whispered, how Tess relied completely on Marcus for decisions, and how unaware they both were of what was really at stake. Inside, I felt a mix of anticipation and control. I wasn't rushing anything, I was fully prepared to act at the right moment. Every decision I had made in secret led to this day, and I was ready to execute my plan flawlessly. I reminded myself to stay composed, to let intelligence and preparation speak louder than anger. The time for subtle, calculated action had arrived, and I felt a steady confidence knowing that everything I had done would soon show its impact in a way Tess could never ignore. I found a quiet moment away from the crowd and approached Tess. I spoke softly, ensuring no one else could overhear, and explained that I knew about the hidden loans and risky deals Marcus had made. I showed her the documents I had carefully collected, laying out the mistakes and potential consequences in a clear, calm way. I emphasized that I hadn't shared this with anyone else. I hadn't wanted to embarrass her in front of the guests or turn the wedding into a spectacle. My goal was simple, to protect her and make sure she avoided a serious mistake. Tessa's expression shifted from confusion to disbelief as she realized the depth of my knowledge. She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out at first. I could see the sudden weight of recognition settle on her shoulders, the recognition that I had anticipated problems she hadn't even noticed and had quietly taken control when needed. Her shock was palpable. I could tell she hadn't expected me to be capable of such insight or planning. The arrogance she had carried all day faltered as she looked at me, really looked, and saw that I was no longer the sister she thought she could dismiss. I didn't gloat or raise my voice. I simply remained composed, letting the truth speak for itself. Every carefully planned step I had taken led to this moment, and it was undeniable. Tessa's realization hit hard, she had underestimated me, and the consequences of her oversight were now impossible to ignore. For the first time in years, the dynamic between us shifted. I had quietly proven my intelligence and foresight, and Tess could no longer deny my capability. I left her stunned, quietly aware that I had won a victory without drama or humiliation. After the private conversation, I returned to the main event, walking with quiet confidence. I didn't need to announce anything or draw attention to myself, my presence alone carried weight. Everyone sensed a subtle shift, though they didn't know why. Marcus, who had been confident all day, began stumbling over small questions and decisions. His ignorance of the financial missteps became evident as I subtly corrected details and guided the staff without making it seem obvious. Guests noticed the contrast between his uncertainty and my composed clarity. Tess watched everything unfold, her face a mixture of disbelief and reluctant admiration. She realized that I had quietly steered the situation, handled potential disasters, and maintained control without creating a scene. My actions spoke louder than words, showing that I was capable, prepared, and smart. I didn't gloat or draw attention to the mistakes Marcus had made. Instead, I allowed the truth to reveal itself naturally. The family began to see who had real foresight and who had relied on assumptions and appearances. Marcus's credibility took a quiet hit, and Tess had no choice but to acknowledge that I had been several steps ahead. For the first time in years, I felt a sense of vindication. The humiliation she had inflicted on me was balanced not with bitterness, but with elegance and strategy. I had proven my value, my intelligence, and my composure, all without stooping to meanness or creating public conflict. Standing there, observing the subtle shifts around me, I finally understood that revenge didn't always have to be loud or cruel. Sometimes, it was the quiet, decisive actions that left the deepest impression, and in that moment, I felt completely vindicated. After the wedding settled, I found myself surrounded by relatives who had quietly admired my calm and capability all along. They offered kind words, small gestures of respect, and conversations that reminded me I wasn't invisible. It felt good to reconnect with those who had always valued me for who I truly was. Tess didn't openly apologize, but her behavior shifted. She asked my opinion on minor decisions, glanced at me with a newfound respect, and subtly indicated that she recognized my guidance had prevented problems she hadn't foreseen. The acknowledgement wasn't loud, but it mattered more because it was genuine and earned. I noticed the difference in myself as well. The anger that had followed her insults weeks ago had melted into clarity and calm. I could finally appreciate my own strength, patience, and intelligence without relying on anyone else's validation. Every step I had taken, from preparation to the discreet handling of crises, had reinforced my confidence. I walked through the remaining celebrations with my head held high, feeling lighter than I had in months. The humiliation and hurt that once weighed me down were gone, replaced by a sense of liberation. I had proven my value, regained my dignity, and, most importantly, recognized my own self-worth. For the first time, I felt entirely in control of my emotions and my life. Tessa's subtle acknowledgement and a quiet respect from family completed the journey. I wasn't just the sister who had been excluded, I was someone who could face adversity with intelligence and grace. That realization brought a profound sense of freedom and confidence that I knew would stay with me long after the wedding ended. Looking back, I realized how much I had grown through all of this. Being betrayed by someone you trust cuts deeper than anything else, but handling it with patience, intelligence, and careful planning changes the whole experience. It's not about causing harm, it's about reclaiming your power and showing that you are stronger than anyone's cruelty. I felt a deep sense of satisfaction knowing that I had acted thoughtfully rather than out of anger. Every decision I made reflected my values and my self-respect. In the end, clever strategy and calm determination mattered far more than any fleeting act of retaliation. This journey taught me that true empowerment comes from understanding your own worth, trusting your judgment, and letting action speak louder than words. When handled with care, revenge can be quiet, effective, and fulfilling without leaving regret behind. So I leave you with this: have you ever been betrayed by someone you loved? Imagine turning the tables, not with meanness, but with intelligence and composure. What would you do if given the chance to protect yourself, assert your worth, and show the person who hurt you that underestimating you was their biggest mistake? Being wronged can feel devastating, but using that pain to build strength and create justice that is smart and subtle can feel even more powerful. Remember, it's not the anger that defines you, it's how you rise above it. Do you think I handled my sister the right way, or should I have let things go and trusted her again? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe for more stories like this.